And, we're in an incredibly exciting time in this industry right now as we make the transformation from internal combustion engine vehicles to electric vehicles.
All right, folks, hold on to your seats because things just got wild in the auto industry. This week has been nothing short of a shocker. Stellantis dropped a bombshell by laying off thousands of workers. And General Motors, one of America's oldest and most iconic companies, saw its president, Marissa West, step down out of the blue. This isn't just another boardroom drama. These moves are rattling the entire industry. And trust me, when giants like Stellantis and GM start stumbling, it's only a matter of time before it affects you and me. A turbulent week in the auto industry. So what exactly is happening? Let's start with Stellantis. If you thought the company was doing fine, think again. This isn't just about tweaking budgets or trimming a bit of fat. We're talking massive layoffs, thousands of workers, factory staff, and even executives losing their jobs. The numbers are enough to make your head spin. In Detroit alone, Stellantis laid off over 2,500 people, and it's not like they're the only ones feeling the heat. GM has been quietly raising its annual financial forecast this year, trying to keep investors happy, but even they couldn't avoid a forecast of declining earnings in the coming months. It's as if both these giants are teetering on the edge. Cracks in the foundation. And here's the kicker. These problems didn't come out of nowhere. GM and Stellantis have been quietly battling market pressures and internal struggles for a while now. In GM's case, they've tried to put a positive spin on things, raising financial forecasts twice this year to reassure shareholders. But analysts aren't buying it. They're still predicting a drop in earnings for the rest of the year. We're looking at projected earnings between $4 and $6 billion, a steep decline from over $8 billion in the first half. For a company like GM, this isn't just a blip, it's a warning sign. And Stellantis, well, they're dealing with their own set of issues. Remember, this is the company formed in 2014 from the merger of Fiat Chrysler and PSA Group. Stellantis was supposed to be the future-proof powerhouse, the merger of old-world automaking with modern efficiency. But here we are just 10 years later, and Stellantis is facing an alarming 12% drop in net revenue in the first quarter of 2024. That's a multi-billion euro slump, folks, and it's a major red flag. They're cutting costs wherever they can, and that means thousands of workers are losing their jobs as Stellantis tries to weather this storm. How it affects us all. Alright, so maybe you're thinking, big deal, companies have ups and downs all the time. But this is different. When automakers the size of GM and Stellantis hit rough waters, the impact ripples across the entire economy. We're talking about job losses that hit local communities hard, plant closures that leave families without income, and on top of that, the taxpayers often end up footing the bill. Stellantis recently received a federal bailout. Yes, a $1 billion government lifeline funded by taxpayers. And while that might sound like a quick fix, it's a reminder of just how fragile these too-big-to-fail companies really are. Imagine this, the automotive industry isn't just a group of car companies making vehicles, it's an ecosystem. When one part struggles, the effects are felt far and wide. Suppliers, dealerships, even local restaurants and service providers around these factories, all of them rely on the flow of business from these automotive giants. The economic link between automakers and everyday life is more intense than most people realize. And if you think the troubles end with GM and Stellantis, think again. This could very well be the canary in the coal mine for a much bigger industry crisis. Uncovering the real problem. Here's where things get interesting. The issues plaguing GM and Stellantis aren't just a matter of poor management or bad luck. The real problem runs much deeper. It's about the industry's struggle to adapt to a rapidly changing market. New competitors, changing consumer demands, skyrocketing production costs. All of it is piling up. For decades, Detroit's big players thrived on gas-guzzling trucks and SUVs, models that were cheap to make and wildly profitable. But the market has changed, and fast. Consumers are now leaning toward efficient, tech-forward electric vehicles, and both GM and Stellantis have found themselves unprepared for this shift. Take Stellantis for example. They recently made headlines by halting production of the Ram 1500 Classic, a model that's been a staple for them. This decision alone led to the layoffs of thousands of workers at their Detroit plant. And what's replacing it? High-end models, luxury SUVs, and premium vehicles like the $67,000 Grand Cherokee. Sure, these new models might attract a more affluent buyer, buyer, but it's clear Stellantis is stepping away from the average consumer, pushing the luxury envelope when most of us are dealing with cost of living pressures. It's as if they're gambling on a high-stakes table, hoping these pricey models will save them from the impending downturn. GM's leadership in question, and then there's GM, and this week we saw what might be the most surprising twist of all. Marissa West, the president who's been steering the ship for almost 20 years, has suddenly left. No official explanation, no major farewell. For a leader like Marissa, this kind of exit is unexpected. So what went wrong? Marissa took the reins at a time when GM was battling to stay relevant. She's been at the forefront of GM's pivot to electric vehicles, self-driving technology, and efforts to compete with Tesla and other electric-first companies. Under her leadership, GM committed to an all-electric future, but the road to get there has been rocky. And while GM raised its profile in the EV market, there's no denying that the journey hasn't been easy. The market has shifted faster than expected, and GM's own projections have lagged behind reality. It's as if Marissa's vision for GM wasn't keeping pace with the challenges and competition from tech-driven brands like Tesla and the newer EV entrants from China. Was her departure a consequence of this growing disconnect, or was it something more? Whatever the reason, her departure signals a major shakeup in GM's strategy, and possibly even a shift in how GM plans to tackle the EV market moving forward. So now we've laid the groundwork, an industry on edge, big names making even bigger moves, and consumers left wondering what's next. But what's coming for Stellantis and GM? Are their strategies enough to stay afloat, or are they headed for an even rockier road? And could luxury pricing, EV pivots, and high-stakes gambles be exactly what these companies need, or the final nail in the coffin? Stick around, because in the next part, we'll dive deeper into Stellantis' strategy shift and whether betting on premium cars can save them. You won't want to miss it. Stellantis' strategy shift. Alright, so now that we've laid out the turbulence at GM and Stellantis, let's dig into what Stellantis is trying to do to navigate these stormy waters. Stellantis, as you know, is the result of a massive merger between Fiat Chrysler and PSA Group back in 2014. This merger was supposed to create a powerhouse that could handle anything the market threw its way. Fast forward to today, and it looks like they're hitting serious roadblocks. With sales dropping and a brand identity that's becoming harder to pin down, Stellantis is trying something bold and a bit risky. Stellantis' high-end gamble. So what's Stellantis' big move? Well, they're betting on high-end models. Yep, that's right. While most of us are feeling the pinch from rising living costs, Stellantis is pushing toward luxury. They're focusing on pricier, high-margin vehicles like the Jeep Grand Cherokee, which retails for nearly $70,000. This isn't just a new model, it's a whole new approach. Jeep and Ram, two of Stellantis' biggest brands, are moving up market, aiming for the affluent buyer who's willing to spend big for top-tier features. And why would they do this now of all times? Simple. High-end models mean bigger profit margins, and in an industry where costs are through the roof, that's huge. Luxury buyers tend to be less affected by economic downturns, and Stellantis is hoping these premium models can lift their bottom line. It's a calculated risk, one that could either establish Jeep and Ram as luxury leaders or backfire if these vehicles end up sitting in showrooms. Because let's be real, not everyone has $60,000 or $70,000 lying around for a new car, especially not now. A tough road for Stellantis. While this luxury shift might seem like a smart play, Stellantis is walking a tightrope here. They're taking a big risk by moving up market, especially given the economic challenges most buyers are facing. Stellantis recently cut thousands of jobs across its US plants, and it's clear they're under serious pressure. Layoffs might seem like an easy way to save money, but they come at a cost. Losing skilled workers doesn't just reduce expenses, it can hit production quality and morale hard, too. So why the layoffs? Stellantis is essentially funneling resources into their electric vehicle ambitions and cutting traditional vehicle production to stay lean. But here's the problem. EV production is incredibly costly, and without a solid team behind it, pushing out reliable EVs becomes a tall order. And let's not forget that every vehicle Stellantis produces, or doesn't produce, directly affects local economies. When plants close or jobs get cut, entire communities feel the hit. We're talking about restaurants, grocery stores, schools, all depending on the income of those factory workers. And here's where it gets even trickier. Stellantis' decision to go high-end while scaling back on traditional models means they're putting all their eggs in one basket. They're betting on high-income buyers in a market that's increasingly unpredictable. That's a risky strategy when so many consumers are looking for affordability, not luxury. If this move doesn't pay off, Stellantis could end up alienating the very customer base that made Jeep and Ram household names in the first place. Stellantis' ambitious electric vision. And if the high-end gamble wasn't enough, Stellantis is making an all-in push for electrification. They've set a bold target. By 2030, every passenger car they sell in Europe will be electric. And for the US market, they're shooting for a 50% EV lineup by the end of the decade. That's ambitious, no doubt. And Stellantis is putting serious cash behind it, investing in 75 new electric models by 2030. If they can pull it off, it would put them on par with some of the biggest EV players out there. But can they? That's the billion-euro question. Here's the thing, transitioning to electric vehicles isn't just about making new models. It's a complete overhaul of how Stellantis and the whole industry operates. Manufacturing, supply chains, and infrastructure all need to be rebuilt, and that's no small feat. Not to mention the infrastructure for EVs, particularly in the US, still has a long way to go. Charging stations are sparse in many areas, especially rural ones, and Stellantis is racing against time to build a reliable network that gives EV owners peace of mind. This isn't just a matter of convenience. It's essential to winning over customers who are still wary of going electric. Range anxiety, the fear of running out of battery without a charging station nearby, is a big deterrent for many potential EV buyers. Stellantis is trying to address this by investing in more charging points and working with partners to expand access, but whether they can do it fast enough to meet their ambitious goals remains to be seen. And without a solid charging infrastructure, all those plans for high-tech electric models may struggle to find buyers. Performance problem and brand identity. And there's another piece of the EV puzzle that Stellantis needs to get right: performance. Yes, EVs are great for the environment, but the driving experience has to live up to customer expectations. For brands like Jeep and Ram, this means delivering the same power and performance that their customers have come to expect. Some Stellantis EVs, like the Peugeot E208, are getting decent reviews for acceleration and handling, but they're still a long way from satisfying those who crave the thrill of a high-powered engine. Stellantis is going to have to strike a balance between eco-friendliness and performance if they want to win over skeptics. Now let's talk about brand identity, because this might be Stellantis' biggest challenge of all. Stellantis isn't just one company, it's a conglomerate of 14 different brands, each with its own personality and loyal customer base. When you have that many brands, it's not just about producing a quality EV, it's about making each EV feel authentic to its brand's legacy. Jeep needs to stay rugged, Ram needs to stay powerful, and Dodge needs to keep its muscle car edge, even in an electric world. Stellantis is basically trying to juggle 14 balls at once, and if they drop even one, they risk alienating a whole section of their market. This task would be monumental for any automaker, let alone one that's facing layoffs, budget cuts, and market pressures. Stellantis needs each brand to stand out, especially in a market that's rapidly crowding with new EVs from every corner of the globe. If Jeep or Dodge EVs don't resonate with their core audience, Stellantis could find itself in an even worse position, with brands that don't sell and inventory that doesn't move. So Stellantis has got ambition, there's no doubt about that. They're trying to straddle the luxury market, expand their EV lineup, and keep their brands distinctive in an industry that's changing faster than ever. It's a lot to juggle, and whether it pays off is anyone's guess. One thing's for sure though, they're up against some of the toughest challenges any automaker has faced in recent history. But the question remains, are these moves enough to keep Stellantis competitive, or are they simply betting on the wrong horse in a market that's looking for affordability and reliability over luxury and novelty? And how will this affect their direct competitors like GM, who are also shifting gears in response to market pressures? In the next part, we'll shift gears ourselves to look at a new challenge: the price wars raging across the EV industry. With companies slashing prices and squeezing profits, the industry's survival may just come down to who can hold their ground. Stay tuned for part 3, where we dive into the high-stakes battle that's turning the EV market into a cutthroat battleground. An industry-wide battle Now that we've seen Stellantis' gamble with luxury models and high-stakes EV ambitions, let's dive into something that's putting even more pressure on them, and it's hitting GM and other automakers just as hard. We're talking about the intense price war happening across the electric vehicle market. You might think a price war is good news for consumers. After all, who doesn't want a discount? But in the auto industry, these tactics can lead to some pretty brutal consequences, affecting quality, innovation, and even the survival of companies. This isn't just about competition, it's about survival, and it's affecting every corner of the EV market. The price wars. So what's going on with this price war? To put it simply, automakers are slashing prices to compete for market share, especially in regions where EV adoption is booming, like China. For companies like Stellantis, Tesla, and even newer brands, the strategy seems straightforward: cut prices, attract more buyers, and grab as much market share as possible. But it's not that easy. While a price cut can attract buyers, it also means the company is earning less on each vehicle sold. With manufacturing costs at an all-time high, these companies are barely breaking even, or in some cases, even losing money on every sale. And Stellantis, they're feeling the squeeze more than most. Competing with brands that were built to produce affordable EVs is a tough game, especially when their focus is shifting to high-margin luxury models. Tesla, on the other hand, has been aggressively lowering prices for their models, driving competition and forcing other automakers to follow suit or risk losing relevance. It's like a high-stakes game of chicken, where everyone's racing to the bottom, hoping to push their competitors out of the lane. The cost of price cuts. Now, here's where the real problem starts. Slashing prices isn't just cutting into profits, it's changing the entire dynamic of the industry. As companies reduce prices, they're also forced to find ways to lower production costs. And unfortunately, that often means cutting corners. We're seeing some companies using cheaper materials, fewer quality checks, and faster production lines, all in the name of saving money. But when quality drops, guess who ends up paying for it? The consumer. Buyers might get a cheaper car up front, but they're potentially facing higher repair costs, shorter lifespans, and even safety issues down the line. And it's not just about quality. Innovation takes a hit too. When profits are squeezed, companies have less to invest in research and development. Think about it. If every cent is going into keeping prices low, there's little left for developing the next groundbreaking technology or improving battery life and charging times. Stellantis, for example, may want to fund their 75 electric models by 2030, but with revenue under pressure, those plans could slow down considerably. And if this price war continues, it could stall innovation across the board, leaving us with more of the same cars for years to come. That's why Carlos Tavares, Stellantis' CEO, is openly warning about what he calls a bloodbath in the EV market. And he's not exaggerating. Tavares sees these price wars as a race to the bottom that will hurt not just Stellantis, but the entire industry. Imagine an automotive landscape where everyone's slashing prices just to stay in the game, sacrificing quality and innovation along the way. In the long run, this could lead to fewer choices, lower quality, and an industry that's only a shadow of what it could be. Why lower prices aren't always better for consumers. So let's talk about what these price wars mean for you and me, the consumers. At first glance, lower prices sound like a win. Who wouldn't want a cheaper EV? But as Tavares and other industry leaders have pointed out, this strategy could backfire in a big way. When automakers are forced to cut costs, the savings have to come from somewhere. That usually means fewer features, lower build quality, and less reliability over the lifespan of the car. It's like paying less upfront only to face higher repair bills down the road. Take Tesla, for example. They've been driving down prices aggressively, which yes, makes EVs more accessible. But Tesla's cost-cutting measures have led to some well-publicized quality control issues, from paint defects to alignment problems. And while some customers are willing to overlook these flaws for the Tesla brand, other automakers may not be able to afford this trade-off. Stellantis, with its sprawling lineup of brands, has a reputation to protect. Jeep drivers expect rugged reliability. Dodge fans want powerful performance. If Stellantis compromises on these expectations just to keep up with Tesla's pricing, they risk alienating loyal customers who've come to expect a certain standard. But here's the kicker: the price war isn't just confined to Tesla and Stellantis. New players, especially from China, are entering the market with competitive prices, further complicating the landscape. Brands like BYD are bringing high-quality EVs at remarkably low prices, especially in the Chinese market. Stellantis and GM are finding themselves squeezed from both sides, competing with luxury brands on one end and budget-friendly yet tech-savvy EVs on the other. holding ground against the price cuts. So how does GM fit into all of this? Well, GM is taking a very different approach. While some automakers are racing to lower prices, GM is playing the long game. They've made it clear they're not going to dive into the price war just to keep up with Tesla. Instead, GM is focusing on maintaining per vehicle profitability, even if that means sacrificing some short-term market share. It's a risky move, especially when rivals are dropping prices left and right, but GM seems determined to preserve its brand value and avoid a downward spiral in quality. GM's strategy? Differentiate on quality and features rather than price alone. They're doubling down on delivering added value in every vehicle, whether that's advanced safety features, better build quality, or improved customer service. In short, GM is saying, we're not the cheapest, but we're worth it. This approach harks back to lessons GM learned in the mid-2000s when they made drastic price cuts to boost sales, only to face financial strain and unsustainable demand. The memory of those days is fresh, and GM doesn't want a repeat of that cycle. And don't get me wrong, GM isn't totally abandoning incentives. They're just using them more strategically. Rather than blanket discounts, GM is targeting incentives to specific models that align with transaction prices. So they're still competitive, but they're being careful not to let incentives become a crutch that erodes brand value. And historically, GM's product diversification has helped them reach different market segments without getting sucked into a price war. By offering a range of models at varying price points, GM has been able to appeal to a wide range of consumers without cutting corners. It's a smart play. GM is avoiding the dangerous territory of price wars and instead focusing on enhancing their brand. But while that sounds sensible, the pressure is still on. GM has to make sure consumers see that added value and believe it's worth the higher price tag. Otherwise, they risk losing ground to brands like Tesla, Stellantis, and BYD, all of which are leaning heavily on price competitiveness. So where does that leave Stellantis and GM? Stellantis is caught in the middle, forced to decide whether to join the price war or stick to their luxury bets. GM is holding its ground, but betting on the fact that consumers will pay more for quality. The EV market is heating up and the stakes are sky high. If either of these companies makes the wrong move, they could end up on the sidelines, watching the market shift around them. But the question remains, can Stellantis and GM find their footing in a market that's changing faster than ever? Or will the price wars and shifting consumer demands force them to make even tougher decisions? In part 4, we'll dive into GM's new approach to EVs and hybrids and how they're hedging their bets to keep a foot in both the electric and traditional worlds. If you thought things were intense now, just wait till we get into GM's next big play. Stay tuned. GM's new approach. So we've seen Stellantis make bold moves into luxury and high-end electric vehicles, and we've explored the intense price wars sweeping the EV market. Now, let's focus on GM, which, unlike Stellantis and Tesla, is betting on a different kind of strategy altogether. GM isn't just diving headfirst into the EV world, they're also bringing back an old friend to the lineup, plug-in hybrids. That's right, while some automakers are going all electric, GM is taking a diversified approach with EVs and hybrids side by side in their lineup, and they're hoping this calculated shift will give them a competitive edge. GMs Electric Gamble. Let's start with GM's main play. They've been making waves with their EV lineup, and they're not just rolling out one or two models, they're going all in. We're talking about everything from the Chevy Silverado EV to the Cadillac Lyriq. And here's the twist, GM isn't turning its back on hybrids. Instead, they're positioning plug-in hybrid electric vehicles, or 4Vs, as a practical bridge between traditional gas vehicles and all-electric options. It's a move that raises eyebrows in an industry that's increasingly fixated on going fully electric, but for GM, it's all about keeping options open and satisfying different types of buyers. Why hybrids? Well, GM has realized that while the future may be electric, not every customer is ready to make that leap yet. By offering plug-in hybrids, GM is giving buyers the benefits of electric power for shorter trips, with the security of a gasoline engine for longer journeys. Essentially, GM's hybrids are a way to keep range anxiety at bay while still cutting down on emissions. In a market where many drivers are still hesitant to go fully electric, this strategy could resonate with consumers looking for a smoother transition. The new GM lineup. So what's in this new lineup that GM is banking on? First up, there's the Chevy Equinox EV, which GM is marketing as their affordable option with a starting price just under $35,000. They're aiming to make this model a mainstream choice for buyers who want to go electric without breaking the bank. But let's be honest, $35,000 still isn't exactly affordable for everyone, especially when compared to traditional gas-powered vehicles. And if you're into trucks, GM's got the Chevy Silverado EV, a rugged powerhouse with a range of over 400 miles. Impressive, right? But it comes with a price tag close to $100,000, putting it firmly in the luxury category. Then there's the Cadillac Lyriq, GM's answer to high-end electric SUVs, which starts around $60,000 for the base model. And finally, we can't forget the GMC Hummer EV, a high-performance off-road ready beast priced over $100,000. So GM isn't playing it safe here. They're going all in with a lineup that screams premium and high-tech, even if it's not the cheapest option on the market. Now, here's where GM's strategy gets interesting. They're refusing to cut prices to join the EV price war. While Tesla, Stellantis, and others are dropping prices to stay competitive, GM is standing firm. They've chosen to focus on maintaining profit margins over capturing short-term market share. Instead of slashing prices, GM is betting that their focus on quality and added features will justify the price for customers who want more than just an inexpensive electric car. Essentially, GM is saying, we're not the cheapest, but we're worth it. It's a bold stance that shows GM isn't willing to sacrifice brand value for quick sales. Why GM is avoiding the price war. And let's break down why GM is staying out of the price-cutting frenzy. For starters, GM's leadership remembers the price cuts of 2005, when they slashed prices to stimulate demand but found themselves facing unsustainable sales levels. It was a painful lesson that left the company struggling to keep up with artificially inflated demand, eventually impacting their financial health. This time around, GM is determined not to repeat those mistakes. Instead, GM is playing the long game. They're prioritizing per-vehicle profitability and enhancing the customer value proposition. In other words, they're focused on building high-quality vehicles with advanced tech and safety features that justify their prices. By doing so, GM hopes to attract customers who are looking for more than just a bargain. They want buyers who are willing to pay a premium for quality and reliability, even if that means fewer sales in the short term. Of course, GM isn't totally averse to incentives. They're just being smarter about it. Instead of blanket discounts, GM is targeting incentives for specific models and aligning them with actual transaction prices. This approach helps keep prices stable while still giving GM room to stay competitive, and it's a strategy that allows them to avoid relying on discounts that could erode brand value over time. It's a disciplined approach, but one that could set GM apart if the EV price wars start to hurt other automakers' bottom lines. The best of both worlds. And this brings us back to GM's hybrid strategy. For GM, plug-in hybrids aren't just a temporary solution, they're a way to bridge the gap between the past and the future. By combining an electric motor with a traditional engine, plug-in hybrids offer extended range, the convenience of quick refueling, and the flexibility that all electric vehicles don't yet provide. Essentially, they're a best of both worlds option, allowing drivers to go electric without the worry of running out of charge on a long trip. Hybrids are especially appealing for regions where EV infrastructure is still developing. While urban areas are seeing more charging stations pop up, rural and suburban areas still lag behind, making hybrids a practical choice for a lot of drivers. And with GM's global reach, offering hybrids could help them tap into markets where fully electric options aren't yet feasible. It's a way for GM to cater to a diverse audience without alienating those who are hesitant to make the full jump to electric. But beyond practicality, plug-in hybrids also represent GM's adaptability. While other companies are betting solely on an all-electric future, GM is hedging its bets, keeping an eye on customer demand while preparing for full electrification down the road. For consumers who aren't ready to give up gas entirely, GM's hybrid offerings give them the flexibility to choose a middle ground. And as the EV market evolves, this hybrid strategy could end up being one of GM's strongest plays. So here we are. GM's vision for the future is a mix of high-end electric vehicles and practical hybrids, a strategy that keeps their options open in a rapidly changing market. They're steering clear of the price wars, sticking to their guns on quality and per-vehicle profitability, and betting that hybrids hybrids will appeal to customers who aren't ready to go all electric just yet. It's a carefully calculated approach, one that could keep GM competitive as other automakers race to the bottom. But the real question is, will this balanced approach be enough to keep GM ahead in an industry that's facing unprecedented challenges? As Stellantis doubles down on luxury EVs, Tesla keeps slashing prices, and new players enter the market, GM is choosing a unique path, and in the end, their success may depend not on what's trending right now, but on whether consumers see the value in paying more for a GM vehicle in a market flooded with cheaper options. Only time will tell if GM's hybrid and EV strategy will pay off. But one thing's for sure, Marissa West's departure, Stellantis' luxury gamble, and the escalating price wars have set the stage for one of the most dramatic periods the automotive industry has ever seen. The choices made today will shape the future of these companies, and possibly the future of driving itself.